Everywhere you look, the rich history of the United Kingdom is there to be seen. But hidden beneath our feet, there's still a wealth of archaeological treasure just waiting to be found. That's why each year, up and down the country, our archaeologists dig down, searching for fresh discoveries.
Another one.
Revealing the imprint of ancient civilizations.
Yeah. So we are looking at a completely unknown Roman town.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And unearthing priceless objects.
Might be a pendant.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
This is something special, isn't it?
Yeah, I've not seen anything like it so far.
Every dig adds new pieces to the ever-growing archaeological jigsaw
Gotta come and have a look.
that is the epic story of our islands. It's been an extraordinary year full of challenges, and yet I've been able to visit so many exciting digs up and down the country.
Oh my goodness.
There have been spine-tingling discoveries to witness.
That is the face of a Trojan.
Yes.
My heart is racing.
And I'm even getting a chance to use a trowel myself. I'm joined by a trio of expert investigators.
I can actually see the texture of the weave, and it's, what, 1,600 years old?
It's amazing that a small DNA sample like this can tell that really quite big story.
As they dig deeper for answers.
Same technique as the Romans used.
Exactly.
Finally, the archaeologists bring their best finds into the studio.
Splash away. You can see that this object has had a life of its own.
For up-close analysis.
It's astonishing detail.
Welcome to Digging for Britain. This time, we're in the Midlands for the latest archaeological discoveries. In a Digging for Britain exclusive, we uncover a truly spectacular ancient sea monster.
This could be one of the biggest finds ever in the UK.
An exquisite key handle reveals the bloodthirst of the Romans.
The children are next on the list after the lion has dispatched this barbarian.
So quite a gruesome subject, actually.
Absolutely.
And an early medieval graveyard shines light on the Dark Ages.
This is an indication of how we've got British history wrong.
From Goodrich Castle to Lincoln Cathedral, the Midlands is strewn with landmarks that tell of its long history. But many parts of this region's story remain hidden beneath the soil. Our first dig is just 3 miles from the centre of one of the Midlands' oldest cities, Leicester. This hill near Leicester is part of a beautiful country park, much beloved of dog walkers. And the bank I've just walked up was once thought to be part of an Iron Age hill fort. It was thought to be, not anymore. Here in Castle Hill Park, for the very first time, archaeologists are investigating what looks like a settlement surrounded by a huge bank and ditch. They want to find out how old this monument really is and who might have lived here. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Alice. Welcome to Castle Hill.
Well, you've got stuck in already.
Indeed.
Matthew Morris from Leicester University is leading the 3rd year of this excavation. So you're the first archaeologist to actually look on this hill?
archaeologist ever to look on this hill.
And you've been here for a few years. What have you been discovering about it?
This site is rather enigmatic because it's, for 60-odd years it was a sewage farm between the 1890s and the 1960s, and so no one's ever looked at this site before.
The whole hillside was covered
Yeah, we've got
in
this
sewage
fantastic photograph of it from the 1960s, and you can see the earthwork really clearly outlined.
Yes.
And you can sort of understand why people pre-sewage farm thought it might have been an Iron Age hill fort.
But they're quite substantial earthworks,
Really
aren't they?
substantial earthworks, but then you can see all of these channels cut across it, which are all the sewage channels. And reputedly, it was not a great place to walk around or explore.
I can see why archaeologists weren't that keen to come and excavate it previously.
Absolutely.
But the sewage is long since gone, and now you can safely dig here and get to the bottom of what this Castle Hill is really about.
Absolutely.
To find out what was built here, Matthew is looking first at the bank and ditch surrounding the site. This image, created using a laser scanning technique known as LiDAR, reveals the shape of the enclosure ditch hidden in the landscape. And now a trench has been dug, creating a cross-section to search for clues as to when it was built.
So this is the northern bank and ditch of the main enclosure.
Oh, so that ditch, when you get down into it, is really deep.
It's really deep and pretty wide as well. So this is a excessively large monument. You can see why people thought this was a hill fort.
So you're convinced now that this isn't prehistoric?
Absolutely, yeah. We're 100% convinced that this is an Iron Age.
So what evidence have you got to prove that to me, Matt?
So from the bank itself, we've got Roman pottery.
Ah, OK.
So this is a bit of Roman greyware.
So Romans come after Iron Age, so Iron Age people can't be creating a bank here with Roman pottery in it.
No, but even better, from the soil layer beneath the bank, we've had these 3 very grotty little bits of medieval pottery.
They're very grotty.
They're very grotty, yeah. Very characteristic of what you'd find in medieval plough soil.
So if there's medieval pottery underneath this bank, there's no way it could have got there.
In the Iron Age.
In the Iron Age.
Yeah, it has to have been dug in the medieval period and built in the medieval period.
Brilliant. So then there's another mystery. Who is here? Why are they converting this hilltop into what looks like a defensive bank and ditch? Why would you want to defend this hilltop?
So we've got a late 13th century document that tells us that in around about 1240, the 6th Earl of Leicester, Simon de Montfort, gives this area to the Knights Hospitaller.
Ah, so now we've got a link with the Crusades then.
And
so the Knights Hospitaller were here.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Knights Hospitaller were established in Jerusalem around 1100, after the city was captured by Christians during the First Crusade. The Crusades to the Holy Land were a series of religious wars between Christians and the Islamic Caliphate. The mission of these knights was to protect and support a hospital in Jerusalem which cared for Christian pilgrims. As conflict with the Islamic Empire intensified, the knights became more militaristic, defending Christian interest in the Holy Land. But what possible connection has this got to a hilltop in Leicester? As the dig progresses, the team uncover more clues that could link this site with these famous knights.
We came across a number of bones just lying on the surface. We've got a mixture of different animals, cattle, sheep, some perhaps dog.
We've had this come out of it, which is a tiny little medieval silver penny. It's been deliberately cut in half to make it a half penny, and that would probably put it in around about the late 12th century or up to the mid 13th century in date.
The archaeology is revealing a site that is far grander than a peasant farm.
So this is the key trench in understanding what is actually going on up here. So the pile of stones we're walking on now, this sort of flat pebbled surface, is actually the yard surface surrounding a building. It's huge, it's 8 metres wide, it's at least 15 metres in length, if not longer than that as well. Possibly has other buildings stretching off to it from the west in that direction.
Yeah.
So it's part of a complex.
And is this a building that people would have lived in?
It does have the sense that it is a fortified manor house, perhaps, or certainly a defended enclosure. It might be the manor house itself, the main house.
But why are they here? Why are they here on a hilltop in Leicestershire?
This is a manor site, effectively a large farm generating income for them that will support their military and charitable activities back in the Holy Land.
So the Knights Hospitaller are farming here. That doesn't explain why they've had to create these defences around the hilltop, though.
The location might be the clue. So the top of this hill here is Leicester Forest, and then going north from us is Charnwood Forest, and then beyond that is Sherwood Forest. And so we're in that fringe of very heavily wooded midlands that is sort of well known for its bandits and outlaws.
So the Knights Hospitaller farming here, surrounded by bandit country, and they essentially have to create almost a castle on top of this hill.
Yeah, which of course the name is a bit of a clue in that respect, Castle Hill.
This is the age of wild woods and outlaws, which inspired local legends like Robin Hood. And this profitable manor house didn't hide its wealth. And it's a well-off farm, isn't it?
It is. When you look at the building material, again, it's using the local granite. We've talked about the slate roof, and the top of the roof would have been capped with glazed ridge tiles that would have had all of these lovely little decorative crests on them.
That's really lovely. So you've got this lovely slate roof topped with
glazed ridge tiles with
green
these
tiles.
little decorative finials along the top of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's really quite ornate. It's
Very ornate, bright green glazed on top of a blue roof.
So, you know, we're not just looking at a series of barns or hovels up here, are we? This is something quite posh, actually. That's lovely. That's really nice. The evidence suggests the buildings would have looked like this. An imposing manor commanding the hilltop over this wild medieval landscape. Some of the artefacts found reveal fascinating details about life here at the height of the Knights' occupation. Matt has put together a selection so that I can get a closer look. What about this lump of something? What's that?
So this is iron hearth slag. So this is one we've sawn in half so you can see the cross section. So this is all the waste that sort of settled to the base of the hearth, the smith's fire.
Yeah. Is this something you would expect to find on a manor and a farm?
It's a working estate centre, so you're going to need every sort of function of that. And when you can't pop over to the shops, you're going to need a blacksmith on site to do all those needed repairs you've got on any metalwork. You've got wheels, horseshoes, maybe even make tools like this knife blade that's come
it's
up.
lovely. So finding evidence of smithing on site doesn't destroy your idea that this is a manor and a farm?
Oh no, absolutely. It's one of those many activities that you would expect to find on a working medieval estate centre.
Yeah. And then what about this pottery? You've got more of this green glaze here.
So these are the things that would be on the table during dining.
Yeah. And
But
is it high status?
It is. It elevates it above just a simple peasant's farm. This is the sort of stuff you'd expect on a much more elevated site, like a Knights Hospitaller site.
Yeah.
So they would give hospitality. Anyone staying, travelling through could stop and spend the night here.
Yeah.
So they do really live up to that element of their name, even though they are a military order.
The archaeology here paints a picture of the knights successfully managing and defending their farm, which would generate income to support their campaigns in the Holy Land. Matt believes he's also found clues as to what eventually happened to the manor farm here at Castle Hill. And then what about the roof of it?
So the roof, we can see all these big piles of blue slates, the remains of the roof. They're all smashed roof slates that have been left piled up on the site because they're all broken and have been discarded.
So are we looking at a building that was demolished then?
Yes, definitely demolished. There doesn't seem to be any evidence of a long period of neglect with the building crumbling away.
Now that Matt and his team are sure that they have found this incredible historic building, he can refer to local records to find out why it was demolished.
We know they're here from 1240 to 1483, at which point they do a land swap with Edward IV for a site in Lincolnshire, and after that, effectively, it goes back to farmland again.
So it's a really short-lived site.
Absolutely, it's really only active for a couple of hundred years, and the pottery really supports that. There's no 11th, 12th century pottery, there's no 15th, 16th, 17th century pottery coming out, it's just 13th, 14th century, which is the period that they hold it.
I love this mystery that you've got to the bottom of, thinking, is it an Iron Age hill fort to begin with? It looks like it might be, with this impressive bank and ditch running around it. And then actually finding a much more interesting story, I think, underlying that.
It's not an excavation where we've left with a massive question mark at the end of it. We've actually got a good idea now of what's going on the site.
And a really rare glimpse of the Knights Hospitaller.
Really rare. There's not many of these sites that have ever been excavated in England. Knights Hospitaller or Knights Templar for that matter. So this excavation is actually hopefully going to redress that.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, what a mystery to have solved.
Oh, absolutely. It's been great fun doing this.
This site is just extraordinary, and I am fairly sure that if it hadn't been for the sewage farm here, that this archaeology would just not have survived. It would have disappeared long ago under development, under a housing estate. But here we are, peeling back this layer of soil, and we can see this incredibly detailed picture of the Knights Hospitaller up here on Castle Hill. It takes us away from the stereotype, I think, of those fighting monks. Yes, they were raising funds to go on crusades to the Holy Land, but they're also here, they're part of the medieval English landscape. The Midlands boast some truly awe-inspiring landscapes, from the dramatic Peak District to the north and the magnificent Malvern Hills to the west. Spectacular geology that formed up to 700 million years ago. Humans are relative newcomers to the region, but that doesn't mean there's no evidence of life before us. Now, Digging for Britain is all about archaeology, but in this series we are making an exception for some paleontology for an exceptionally beautiful fossil. Our next dig takes us to a nature reserve 20 miles west of Leicester, Rutland Water. This is the biggest artificial lake in the country. The reservoir holds over 124 billion litres, providing water to the whole of the East Midlands. But in the winter of 2020, staff here discovered tantalising clues of something spectacular lurking in its depths. They called in paleontologist Dean Lomax from the University of Manchester.
This is a nature reserve and there's lots of animals that live here, but during the wintering months they lower the water levels, and in doing so they've exposed lots of the Jurassic clays which are stood on here, which you can see behind me. And by doing that, two of the members of staff were walking across the site and they spotted something poking out of the clay. Walked over to it and they found these vertebrae exposed and bits of what looked like pieces of jaw.
Oh, nice. It looks like a bit of the snout, yeah. Well, it connects up here, though.
Oh, it's such a cool discovery. It really is.
The staff at Rutland Water had stumbled on some extraordinary fossilised bones.
Yeah. We've marked out, using these wooden sticks, where there's more bone underneath. And for the animal, for the size of this animal, you can work out from the size of the vertebrae and the size of these jaw portions that are exposed. We think the skull might be 1.5 metres, 2 metres, possibly even more. But this is really, really impressive.
Dean and his team are almost certain that this is the fossilised skeleton of an ichthyosaur, an ancient marine reptile that first appeared around 250 million years ago, long before dinosaurs such as Tyrannosaurus rex. Like whales, ichthyosaurs were air-breathing and warm-blooded, giving birth to live young. They could grow huge, almost as big as a blue whale, but they certainly never swam in Rutland Water, which was built in the 1970s.
Usually, you think of ichthyosaurs and other marine reptiles being discovered along the Jurassic coast in Dorset or the Yorkshire coast as well, and where many of those animals are exposed through the constant erosion of the cliffs and the foreshore, whereas here, at an inland location, is very unusual. We're inland, yet these animals lived in a marine setting. They were ocean-dwelling animals.
200 million years ago, the Midlands were part of the seabed under a huge, shallow ocean. The continent was lifting and the sea itself would eventually dry up. dead marine animals which had lain on the seabed and become entombed in silt would slowly transform into fossils.
It's quite a big animal, and that's one of the really interesting things. Potentially, this could be one of the biggest ichthyosaur finds ever in the UK, as a skeleton as well.
Unlike fossils encased in hard rock, this soft mudstone will allow for quick excavation.
What do you want to take it to, the blue post? Because
The furthest bit of the skull.
And an early chance for the team to measure it.
Okay, you take it along the...
Okay, let me get in closer. Place your bets.
9.5.
9.5. Yeah, I mean here it's a case we just continue across.
Yeah.
The largest complete ichthyosaur ever found in Britain was discovered in 1857 on the Yorkshire coast and measured approximately 8 metres in length. But this specimen could be far larger.
Yeah, that's 32.4 feet. Yeah. So metres wise, 9.8, almost 10 metres. So the one in York, I'd have to triple check it. I think this one's bigger.
At nearly 10 metres, this ichthyosaur could be a UK record breaker and therefore of national significance. But it's midwinter, and as this small window of fine weather is set to close, time is running out to rescue it from the mud.
Ideally, the plan today would have been to remove all the material that's exposed. However, we can't run glues in here and we can't remove all of this material carefully enough that we know it's going to be safe. It's definitely not the ideal conditions to collect this right now, so we have to come back later in the year, and that's all part of the fun and games.
As it will soon be fully submerged, the team decide to protect the fossil and return in the summer to complete their mission, to excavate Britain's largest ichthyosaur and preserve it for the nation. We'll join Dean and his team later in the programme to see if they can successfully raise this monster from the deep. The Midlands has always had a strong identity. From the birthplace of manufacturing at the start of the Industrial Revolution, to the ancient Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Mercia 1,000 years earlier. But it's here that history starts to get murky.
There is no period in English history that's more hotly contested than that period of time when the Roman army has left, the 5th, 6th centuries, the so-called Dark Ages, when later historians tell us that boatloads of Germanic tribes were arriving in the east of England. Now, archaeologists have called that history into question, but it will be a long time before we know more about who those people really were. But archaeology can shed light on the richness and complexity of their culture, as we see in this next dig. We travel to the city with the second oldest university in the country, Cambridge. From its founding in 1209, the history of Cambridge University, the city and its people are well documented, but go back another 7 centuries and much less is known about the people who lived here. Because we have so little written evidence from the time, Britain after Roman rule is largely a historical void. But in the summer of 2020, workers on a building site for King's College started finding skeletons that might help change that view. They called in the archaeologists.
Is that a good one, Archie? Is it big?
Who filmed themselves on our Dig Diary cameras.
That was a good one. That's singing for joy. My goodness me. I don't think there'll be any room for a body.
Supervising the team from Albion Archaeology is Ernie Rizzo.
And we have a Anglo-Saxon cemetery, which is something we don't usually work on. It's one of those things we tend to get excited about because they're so rare. So the fact that we've had the opportunity to work on this cemetery is fantastic.
In all, the team have uncovered 70 burials, all dating from this post-Roman period.
Because we have a decent amount of burials, we can really establish whether these people are actually immigrants who've come over or if they are people who've just taken on the culture. So much of what we know of, especially early Saxon, the transition from Roman into Saxon, whether these people were migrants or whether they were just Britons who had adapted from Roman and then assimilated into Saxon. And the lack of site to interpret that means that something like this is really important.
It looks like it could be a spearhead. We've had a couple of burials on site that have had these spears packed in next to them.
Whether these were items that were associated with the people being buried or whether they were offerings from relatives, we're not quite sure, but there's a strong tradition of placing the bodies into the graves with belongings.
Many of these burials included grave goods, a common practice for early Anglo-Saxons. These artefacts provide tantalising clues about the lives of their owners.
There are a couple of brooches. One here, and there's another one. Yeah. And not only are there 3 brooches, there's more and more beads coming out.
She might have been wearing a belt. We've got a small knife and a belt loop, or that could be a ring. Quite a rich and involved burial, which is nice.
So far, these artefacts are typical of Anglo-Saxon communities in the early medieval period.
So Irena's just lifted a really nice find, but we're not sure what it is.
Irena's beautiful glass object is a very unusual discovery.
Honestly, at the first sight, we thought it was pretty modern, maybe Victorian, but then after cleaning it a bit and considering it was close to a Roman coin.
Wow.
And potentially, I think this could have been a high-status burial, possibly.
The team believe that this is a Roman barrel flask, perhaps used to store perfume, which could have been made hundreds of years before it was eventually placed in this grave. It's a cultural link between Rome and Britain and these early Anglo-Saxons.
Lovely.
Towards the end of the excavation, the team begin to unearth another stunning object.
Copper alloy object with what looks like gold inlay. We've got 2 brooches on either shoulder and a little amber bead here, and then this in the middle, which might be a pendant.
Oh yeah, I can see that.
Something like that.
Wow.
So that's really, really cool.
The position of the brooch on the chest suggests this person was buried wearing a cloak.
Okay, Mike, are we ready to lift? Let's have a closer look at this brooch. Amazing detail.
Absolutely lovely.
The brooch is stunning, but it's what's on the back of it that could tell us even more about the people that lived here. Traces of the cloak itself, fabric buried 1,500 years ago.
There it is.
This evidence of Anglo-Saxon textiles offers experts an incredibly rare chance to learn more about the people that wore them and made them. Historian Onyeka Nubia has come to see that analysis in action.
Sometimes the investigation of a small item can give birth to a new understanding and help us to reshape our thinking of Britain and of British history. Helping me decipher any clues in the remnants of the fabric is early medieval textile specialist Sue Harrington. So these are the most important objects discovered at the Croft Gardens burial ground.
Yes, indeed. This is a copper alloy cruciform brooch.
Wow, it's just incredible because it's so well preserved.
Yes, it is, isn't it? But we turn this over.
Ah, so is that the textile that's the brooch was attached to?
Yes and no. If you look carefully there, you can see not the actual fibres, but you can see it in a mineralised form, which is how it preserves in contact with metal. The brooch was actually attached to this textile. You can see it almost so it's wound round the pin.
Well, I can actually see the texture of the weave,
Yeah.
even from here. And it's
Yeah.
what, 1,600 years old?
Probably about 475 AD.
Wow. Sue's deep knowledge of these textiles means we can better understand the cultures that made and wore them in 5th and 6th century Cambridge.
What we've got here is something called a ZZ22 twill.
Okay, what's that?
ZZ means that the spin direction is in the shape of a Z. It's the sort of cloth that your jeans are made of, denim. That's a twill. Right. And if you look very closely at that, you'll see the same sort of ziggy-zaggy pattern.
So the weave of the wool, can we tell anything more about where it was woven?
In 6th, 7th century, cloth production was still ongoing in the Byzantine world, in the Eastern Empire. And possibly there was trade. Trade, we know, comes up through the Rhineland, around the North Sea. This is the sort of cloth that would have been traded around the North Sea. But my sense from this particular piece is that it's probably locally produced.
Right. Sue thinks this quite sophisticated weave was traded among the cultures across Northern Europe, including Scandinavia.
I have this one here, which I'll show you.
Astonishing that you can glean this fact from something as simple as fragments of residual fabric. Oh, that's fantastic. But another brooch tells us a different story.
This is from the grave of a woman who's slightly younger, 20 to 30 at age of death. This is what's known as a tabby, or a plain weave. It's essentially a thread going over one, under one, over one, under one, in both directions. But you can see from this is quite a fine piece of fabric, much finer than the twill we were looking at.
So we've seen now that there's at least 2 different types of weave. Does this mean that there are 2 types of weaving cultures? 2 different types of people doing weaving?
Well, it depends whether you're weaving for yourself or you're weaving for your community, but the amount of labour required would mean perhaps input of dedicated labour, such as slaves, to do this. I mean, there is an inference that Roman-type craft traditions continued in certain areas of the country.
So you just said something really intriguing. You said that there is a continuation of Roman tradition into the 5th century when this artifact is dated. And that's really, really important because a lot of people say that when 410 happens, everything Roman stops.
Yeah.
And then a whole new set of culture happens.
Yeah.
And this artifact is clearly showing that that's not the case.
Whether Roman traditions continued is a possibility. Whether new traditions came in is also a possibility, and how they all mixed together is the answer.
The mixture of fabrics found in these graves reflects the blending of cultural influences on the people buried there. This is in many ways an indication of how we've got British history wrong. Because we speak about British history with a series of sentences and full stops. But it is not like that. It's a series of commas, half sentences and question marks.
Yes.
When I was looking at those grave goods with Sue, I began to understand the importance of history working with archaeology. Here we were looking at small items, textiles, little bits of material, and yet it provided a window that helped me understand the rich tapestry of this period that people call the Dark Ages. I discovered that it's not particularly dark at all.
The Romans created our earliest written sources about the Midlands, but they did far more than just leave records. Hundreds of their ruins dot the landscape, like Wroxeter, once one of the largest towns in Britain. And even our modern cities still hide Roman secrets.
Large excavations in our towns and cities give us the opportunity to see how these places that we're so familiar with have evolved through time. But sometimes it's the smallest of finds, objects which just fit in the palm of the hand, that give us the most astonishing glimpse of cultures long forgotten, as we see in our next story.
We return to Leicester and a dig that actually happened more than 4 years ago, in the heart of the city centre. Back in 2017, clearance was underway for a large new development, and a team from University of Leicester Archaeological Services had a unique opportunity to fully excavate this area. The archaeologists filmed all of their work on small handheld cameras, not realising what treasure they were about to discover. Leicester was an Iron Age settlement which became a major Roman town in the 1st century, but what the team uncovered was truly astonishing. They unearthed 2 ancient Roman streets and 2 incredibly well-preserved houses full of mosaics dating back to 250 AD. One mosaic was more than 10 metres long, and what's more, the room it was in had underfloor heating. This grand townhouse in the centre of Roman Leicester clearly belonged to one of the city's most important citizens. But as the dig progressed, it's one of the smallest discoveries found buried in the floor that stunned archaeologists.
And maybe the body here, the arm around this one. Hand there and arm. They're like almost cartoon, sort of, like big hands.
In the 4 years since its discovery, painstaking conservation has restored this intricate piece of metalwork to its former glory. Gavin Speed and Nick Cooper are at the Digging for Britain tent to share what they've learned about this object and the amazing site where it was found.
So that's what Leicester would have looked like, what, in the 3rd, 4th century?
That's right, yes. This is a brand new reconstruction we've done based on all our excavation results, and gives us a good view of Roman Leicester in the 3rd century. You can see the forum and the main market buildings over here, and possibly the new theatre under construction in the early 3rd century. And the site itself occupies this very large townhouse, and it had multiple rooms. Some of the rooms were heated.
So whoever it was that lived in that house must have been fairly wealthy to live in such an opulent townhouse right in the centre.
Yeah, we found a variety of objects within the townhouse itself and also in rubbish dumps nearby.
And this was the key find, the star find, wasn't it?
It certainly was.
Can I pick it up?
Yeah, shall I?
Talk me through it.
So this is a Roman key handle. And
well, it's quite heavy.
It is.
Yeah. Is it a bronze object?
Yes, it's cast bronze. Would have originally had an iron key coming out of it, but that's been lost. And then you're left with the decorative handle itself, which if you put it in the palm of your hand, it feels really nice. This is a really high status, a bespoke product. We've never seen anything like it before.
Really?
There's not another one like it, certainly not in Britain.
It is so sculptural. It's just full of figures that are all wrapped around each other. It's quite difficult when you first look at it, isn't it,
yes,
to work out what's going on. But I think I've spotted 4 boys at the bottom here, almost like little cherubs. And standing on their heads is this man who seems to be fighting with a lion.
Yes, there's definitely a protective element amongst the group of boys.
So the boys are all naked. The man at the top is wearing trousers. He's got a big, thick belt on as well. And he's being mauled by this lion, which is coming around here. He's grappling with it. And this character has got long, flowing hair. He's got a beard. Who is he then?
Well, I think he's a representation of a barbarian, anybody who is not within the Roman Empire.
So somebody from beyond the bounds of the empire, somebody who is uncivilised.
Yeah.
Do you think this is representing a wild scene? Is this a barbarian fighting with a wild lion? Or are we looking at a depiction of something which might have happened in an amphitheatre?
Well, that's our take on it, that it's a depiction of damnatio ad bestias, which is the lawful killing of convicts and particularly prisoners of war in the amphitheatre by setting wild animals on them. In this case, I think we're seeing a barbarian attacked by a lion, and the children of the tribe are next on the list after the lion has dispatched this barbarian.
It's quite a gruesome subject, actually.
Absolutely.
And it's obviously had a life beyond being a key handle, because the key's long gone, and then it seems to have ended up in in the ground, just as a sculpture in its own right, really.
Yeah, the depiction that the idea of having the lion, particularly, is a symbol of security and is used as a way of warding off evil spirits, and so a key would be a fitting thing. But what appears to me is that it's buried much later on under a floor of a later phase of the building, long beyond its heyday, but perhaps it still held some power there and was symbolically placed in the floor.
You don't think it was just lost?
There's not any other rubbish in that floor layer. It's there and it was stood upright originally in the substrate, so it's not a rubbish deposit in that sense. So it's something that's been purposely placed under a new floor.
If the key handle is evidence of the famous Roman thirst for blood, another spectacular discovery shows a far more refined side.
Almost looks like a hand sitting there on the table. Can I pick that up?
Yes.
What is it?
Well, it's a very ornate toilet set, you know, what you think of as a manicure set, if you like.
Ah, yes.
Usually they're very workaday. You know, you'd have a pair of tweezers, a nail cleaner, an ear scoop in there. But this is another sort of bespoke item. It's got lovely enamelling.
That is gorgeous. I can even see the colours of that. There's a stripe of green, then blue, then green again.
Yeah.
Of enamel. And this looks like a little file.
Yes, it's even got a little serrated edge there.
Yeah.
There are only two other complete ones. There's one from London and one from Castleford in Yorkshire. They're the only two complete ones. So these aren't workaday items. These are prestige bits of jewellery.
You quite often get individual tweezers, ear scoops, that kind of thing. But it's unusual to have them all assembled.
So, yes, it does make you think about who owned this. You know, if we look at any of the other jewellery that we've got, you know, we really are in the top drawer of material.
So we are looking at the upper echelons of society in Roman Leicester.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think what's absolutely fascinating is that in the centre of that town, somebody owns this key handle with an image of a barbarian being attacked by a lion. And the ancestors of these people presumably were barbarians at some point, and then they've become fully Romanised. It just looked like such an incredible dig and a real opportunity to dig right in the centre of Leicester and get down to those Roman levels. That must have been extraordinary.
It certainly was, yes. It was an amazing opportunity to excavate in such a large area as well, to really get a good understanding of the Roman past of the city.
Next, we're back at Rutland Water. In the summer of 2021, Dean Lomax and his team return to the ancient fossil of what might be a record-breaking ichthyosaur. It's a rescue mission that will require all the experience of Dean's team to succeed.
To get involved in a dig like this, it's such a privilege to be here, and potentially it could be a career-defining moment to see what we uncover here.
9 months after the original dig had to be abandoned, the summer sun has dried out the 200-million-year-old Jurassic sediment, but the clock is still ticking on excavating this monster find.
It's at a point where there's no way that it can stay in the ground for another winter. And already a lot of the material is very, very crumbly. And some of this, if we left it any longer, it was like, poof, it'll be gone. We don't want that.
With the evidence now much clearer, the team can expose the complete fossil, and it is truly enormous. Now, forensic details of what happened after this ancient animal died are becoming clearer.
Now this very scientific, accurate model, or thereabouts, this one in particular is very, very interesting for multiple reasons, but we think when this animal died, bloated and floated, it would have been picked up by scavengers, and eventually, over time, the carcass would have drifted and nosedived to the bottom of the seabed, where what we think is the skull would have landed obviously first, which is why we think the vertebral column is quite disarticulated. And then you've had other animals scavenging on it as well.
Examining the fossil carefully in situ, Dean reconstructs a brutal scene from 200 million years ago in the ocean that once covered the British Isles.
This is the left hind fin that is beautifully preserved. There's a bit of a mystery here because this is the leading edge. You see these little notches here. That should be pointing in this direction. So I'm trying to work out exactly what's going on. Potentially, it might be that some scavenger or a predator has been in here and tugging away at the fin. But then also, if you look at the vertebral column, it's fully articulated here, and then there's a sudden angular change. So potentially, what's going on here, you've had another animal tugging away, and it's pulled the entire carcass to the side and ripped off part of the hind fin. So pretty gnarly, and more ichthyosaur CSI required, I think.
The largest ichthyosaurs, like this one, were apex predators of the oceans. So whatever tore this monster's body apart would need very powerful jaws. Right next to the fin, the perpetrator left a calling card, and Dean's hunch is proved right.
We found a tooth.
Yeah, so we decided to start clearing some of this in the hope that we would find another tooth. And then there you go, we spotted one. So you can see a bit of the enamel at the top there.
Very, very cool. So we found this tooth. What this means is that we had another ichthyosaur, another large apex predator, scavenging on this portion of the tail, and it's lost a tooth in the process. It tells us more about the behavior of these animals, other ones actually feeding on this piece. It shows that not only is it scavenging, because it's another ichthyosaur tooth, it shows that these are also cannibalistic.
With every new bone exposed, the team learn more about these fantastic beasts. But the largest part of the ichthyosaur is keeping its secrets well hidden.
This is the beautiful, massive skull, but we're looking at the underside of the skull, so we're not going to see the eyes here, whereas in fact what we're seeing is parts of what we call the palatal bones in here, parts of the brain case as well, so from underneath, potentially you'd find a piece with what actually was inside the eyeball called the sclerotic ring. They would be buried underneath here, but we're unsure at the moment whether the skull is sort of pancaked flat, as if it's like Jurassic roadkill, or is it a fact that it's still three-dimensional? It's really hard to tell until we actually dig a trench around this and dig deep down by at least a foot or more and get underneath.
Only when it's back in the laboratory can the skull be analysed properly. The team dig a deep pit all around it so they can remove it as one.
We're going to have 6 or 7 beams going widthwise underneath this, and we're going to screw them all together, lift up those beams, which will lift the entire block nice and neatly, hopefully.
The wooden frame supports the skull, which is now encased in plaster of Paris and weighs in at around a ton. Even though there's help with the lift, it's a nail-biting procedure.
Right, very gently back.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic job, Nigel.
Good to see it out of the ground in one piece for now, and on the back of the trailer.
Brilliant.
Confirmed at 10.5 metres long from nose to tail, this fantastic find is officially the largest complete ichthyosaur fossil ever found in Britain. Moving 200 million years on from the age of sea monsters. Modern humans arrived in Britain some 40,000 years ago. They were Stone Age hunter-gatherers. 6,000 years ago, farmers arrived. Then came the Bronze Age. And the final prehistoric culture of Britain was the Iron Age. Our next dig takes us to the heart of the Midlands, 25 miles south of Coventry, near a farm called Blackgrounds. The site was identified as an area of interest by archaeologists working on HS2. But when they actually surveyed the area, its scale exceeded their wildest expectations.
Now, there was a Roman villa known about, which was over where that large tree is, just beyond the horses, but it was thought to be isolated in the landscape until the geophysical survey was carried out, at which point the archaeologists realised they were going to have to excavate a huge area, some 14 hectares, that's about 35 football pitches.
The sheer size of the site is extraordinary, but it could also answer some equally big questions about a period of great change in British history. Britain was inhabited by groups of Iron Age people when the Romans arrived in 43 AD. The clash between the newly arrived and existing cultures was sometimes violent, and we often find Roman forts built directly on top of older Iron Age sites. But here at Blackgrounds, there's something different. Nick Finch is project archaeologist for HS2.
Nick, what did you find then when you started looking at the geophysical surveys before you started digging?
We've got the Roman villa complex, which is this dark material in the south, which, as you can see, is quite significant. And then we've undertaken further archaeological survey to the north, which identified to be an Iron Age sort of village complex. You can see here, with all the Iron Age roundhouses and anomalies, you can see them all pocketed along, really.
Lots of circles.
Lots of circles.
It appears that this Iron Age village is abandoned soon after the Roman invasion. And just a quarter of a mile down the hill, a new settlement grows up in its place. Instead of roundhouses, there are impressive foundations and walls of stone buildings, evidence of water wells, industry, and a large road. But no military presence. It seems most likely that the people living here are still the locals, now embracing a Roman way of life. And some of the objects the dig team have found could help explain why, as molar archaeologist Matt Smith explains.
This tray holds Iron Age pottery that we've recovered from the roundhouses towards the northern end of the site, and this stuff is mostly chunky, locally made pottery full of shelly inclusions, and it's quite thick and ugly and utilitarian.
It does the job, though.
It does, yes. It's not something that you've got on your shelf for looking at. It's something that you're cooking in, storing things in. But what we see later on is the incorporation of the Roman pottery. It gets introduced, like the Samian.
This much more refined pottery was found in the later Roman period settlement.
So this is made in, well, what is now France, isn't it?
It is, yes, and that just shows that we have a very high status settlement here as well.
And this is just the base of what presumably was quite a nice bowl.
Yes, and it really is wealthy individuals who can afford to have a whole sort of dinner service of Samian pottery.
Yeah.
More utilitarian stuff from the Roman period. We have this large sherd of what's probably an amphora, so that'd be a storage vessel, most likely, that would have held wine or olives or olive oil, something like that.
So they're enjoying the luxuries of the Roman Empire here?
They absolutely are, yes.
I think these changes in lifestyle are really interesting, that people are, they're aspiring to having these Roman things.
Absolutely. It's reflected in the settlement itself, and it's almost certainly the case that the Iron Age people will have aspired to upgrade their roundhouses into solid stone Roman structures. I don't think we're necessarily seeing Romans moving in. I think we're just seeing the Iron Age peoples adopting the Roman culture that is very appealing to them, really.
Yeah, suddenly a roundhouse feels a bit old-fashioned.
It does, absolutely.
Over the next few weeks, the team continue to uncover more evidence of the transition from the Iron Age into Roman Britain. Molar finds specialist Owen Humphreys has brought some of the artefacts into the Digging for Britain tent for me to look at.
Take me through some of these finds then and what they tell us about what was happening at the site. What's this one, first of all?
This is what we call a Colchester type brooch. Its distinctive feature is this little hook at the top that holds the spring in place, and then this perforation on the catch plate that tells us when it dates to. made exclusively in Britain and widely used in southeastern England
Right.
from the 1st century BC into the early Roman periods, tying to that broader local Iron Age culture. One of the fascinating things about this one is that you notice that it's green because it's copper alloy,
Yeah.
but around the spring there's lots of red iron staining. So
Yeah, it looks rusty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that shows us that the pin at one point, which was originally copper alloy, has been replaced with one made of iron. That's a repair that shows that this object was kept and used over a long period of time, so
Yeah.
maybe used even into the Roman period as a sort of heirloom piece.
That's just brilliant. So real kind of detective work, and you can see that this object has had a life of its own, and you can see that it's been repaired. And
Absolutely. The story of the site really is that it's not looking like we're seeing a very simple transition between Roman and Iron Age. There's a lot of evidence for continuity and a really complex meshing of cultures rather than a simple conquest and replacement narrative.
It's interesting, isn't it, to think about the experience of those Iron Age people as they become part of the Roman Empire. And obviously in some places there was great resistance to that. Other places down, particularly in the southeast, it was almost welcoming the Romans in. So it's interesting once we get to the kind of middle of the country to work out what was going on there.
Absolutely. And it very much appears that at this site people were happily taking up new Roman ways of life, or aspects of Roman way of life at least. This rather lovely hairpin is a 1st or 2nd century date. Hairpins are basically unknown in Britain during the Iron Age. It's not part of how women styled their hair.
Yeah.
But you can find this style of hairpin depicted on statues of imperial women and portraits on mummies in Egypt.
So this is very much a Roman fashion arriving in Britain.
Absolutely, and it would have been very conspicuous. This type of pin relates to a style of hair where you'd have it all built up in a big sort of ball on your head with the pin sticking through it. Very retro 80s looking.
Yeah, like a beehive almost.
Exactly, and it really would have changed the way people looked.
What about these coins then, Erin? What do they tell us?
So these coins are fascinating because they go all the way through into the 4th century. So we're seeing these settlements last throughout the Roman period. These coins show that occupation at this site was continuing and perhaps even thriving at a time when the empire itself was almost limping along.
History is telling us that story of political turmoil, and perhaps you then get that expectation that that is going to play out right across the landscape of the Roman Empire. And archaeology then gives us a different view of ordinary people's lives.
Absolutely. It's that local experience that is connected to the wider imperial global story, but doesn't follow every one of its beats exactly.
So what's this first one then?
So that first one is a silver denarius of Septimius Severus, emperor originally from North Africa who actually died in Britain. The fascinating thing about that one is
It's got a little boat on it.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you look surrounding it, you can see that there are creatures and chariots. So what this represents is the Circus Maximus in Rome, flooded to stage mock naval battles.
Yes, yeah.
So even though we're in this quite large rural settlement, still a rural settlement on the province and the fringes of the empire, people are aware of these big Roman cultural events and things happening back in the capital.
Let's have a look at the other side. Is that Septimus himself that we're looking at there,
Yeah,
do you think?
the man himself with his characteristic beard.
I was going to say, he's bearded. Is that unusual for a Roman?
It's something that comes in with Hadrian, especially in the 2nd, 3rd centuries.
Yeah.
People start adopting that bearded style.
Oh, so the Romans are picking up barbaric customs as well as the Iron Age
Absolutely.
people picking up Roman customs. I like it.